January 17th, 1991. 30,000 feet above the Euphrates River basin where the desert stretched brown and endless beneath a sky turned hostile. The F-15 Eagle banked hard left as warning tones screamed through Jack Mitchell's headset, that particular frequency that meant someone wanted him dead and had the weapons to try. He was 28 years old and already understood that war wasn't glory, just mathematics with blood mixed in. The heads-up display painted 4 red diamonds against the canopy glass. MiG-29 Fulcrums, climbing fast from Ballard Air Base, their pilots hungry and trained, and every bit as scared as Jack would be if he let himself think about it. But thinking got you killed at Mach 1.2 with enemy fighters closing from your 6 o'clock. So Jack's hands moved across the throttle and stick, with the precision of a surgeon, each micro-adjustment, calculated, each breath measured and controlled. The radio crackled with static and adrenaline. Eagle 2-3, his wingman somewhere in the thermal chaos below the cloud deck, voice tight with the strain of pulling 6 Gs in a defensive spiral. Eagle 1, you got multiple bogeys inbound, 4 MiG-29s, Angels 2-0, and climbing. Jack's thumb found the targeting selector, cycling through modes his instructors had drilled into muscle memory at Nellis. The rage that had carried him through pilot training, through the endless desert sorties, watching boys his age come back in body bags, or not come back at all of it compressed now into ice-cold focus. The Air Force taught you to fly. The war taught you to survive. But something else, something the instructors couldn't name in their manuals, taught you when not to pull the trigger. The first MiG broke through the cloud layer like a shark rising from deep water condensation streaming off its wings in the thin air. Jack rolled, inverted, pulled -G until his vision tunneled, and his stomach tried to climb out through his throat, came up behind the hostile 7 o'clock with the sun at his back exactly the way they'd taught him. Textbook. The enemy pilot never saw him coming, never had a chance to react before the radar warning receiver in his cockpit started screaming its death song. The radar lock tone sang in Jack's ears, sweet and deadly and final. His thumb hovered over the weapons release button, muscle memory screaming to complete the sequence he'd drilled 10,000 times in simulators and live fire exercises. 1 squeeze, 1 AM-9 Sidewinder, tracking heat signature, 1 less enemy fighter in the sky. The math was simple and absolute. The MiG pilot ejected. The canopy blew clear in a puff of explosive bolts and flame. The ejection seat rocketed away from the doomed aircraft, trailing fire and smoke, the pilot's body rigid in the harness as G-forces compressed his spine. The parachute deployed at exactly the right altitude, white silk blossoming against the brown desert tapestry far below. A man dangling in the harness, helpless, vulnerable, already defeated, and no longer a threat to anyone. Jack's thumb lifted off the weapons release button. The targeting computer beeped angry questions, demanding commitment, demanding completion, demanding death. The tone changed pitch insistent, designed by engineers who understood that hesitation in combat was measured in milliseconds and could mean the difference between going home and burning up over enemy territory. But Jack banked away, leaving the ejected pilot to drift toward Earth and whatever mercy the ground forces might or might not offer when he landed. Eagle 2-3's voice crackled with confusion, threaded through with something that might have been anger or disbelief or both. 2-1, that's a confirmed kill. You had the shot. The words came out flat, emotionless, final. The tone of a man who'd made a decision and wouldn't be arguing about it with anyone who hadn't been there. Negative. He's no longer a threat. Static filled the channel. Somewhere in that emptiness, Jack knew his wingman was trying to understand why anyone would choose mercy at 30,000 feet. When the rulebook said to finish the job, when doctrine demanded that downed enemy pilots in parachutes represented legitimate targets because they'd fight again if they survived. But the rulebook had never watched a man burn alive in a cockpit, had never smelled aviation fuel mixed with human flesh, had never seen what killing for the sake of completion did to a pilot's eyes after the 100th sortie. The way the light went out of them, one mission at a time, until nothing remained but the machinery of violence. 3 more MiGs remained in the fight. Jack engaged them with the cold efficiency that had earned him the call sign Reaper, destroying 2 with textbook beyond visual range shots and forcing the 3rd to break off and run for the border with his fuel state critical and his nerve shattered. The mission log would record 3 kills. The official debrief would note his decision to hold fire on the ejected pilot as a tactical judgment call within acceptable parameters. But Jack would remember that moment for the rest of his life, the moment he proved to himself that even in war, even at the edge where survival demanded brutality, there was still space for something human. 70 miles above Earth's atmosphere in the crystal observation deck of a Zarelian scout vessel that had been monitoring coalition air operations for the better part of 6 months, a being watched through sensors that could count the rivets on Jack's aircraft from orbit and read the heat signature of his fear. Selena, Crown Princess of the Zyrelian Empire, had been observing Earth's military conflicts since before this particular war began. She'd watched countless human warriors demonstrate the species' capacity for violence, their primitive but effective weapons systems, their tactical innovations born of desperation, and the kind of ingenuity that came from knowing you were outgunned and had to think your way to survival. But this moment registered as anomalous data on every screen surrounding her command chair. The human had chosen mercy when doctrine demanded elimination. Her tactical analysis algorithms, trained on 10,000 years of Zyrelian military philosophy and fed data from 300 conquered worlds, flagged the decision as an error in judgment. But something in the way the small craft banked away, the deliberate choice visible in the flight path, recorded by sensors that missed nothing, spoke to a principle her people had forgotten, sometime in their climb to galactic dominance. Her voice, when she spoke, carried harmonics that no human throat could produce, frequencies that resonated in the crystalline structure of the observation deck. Mark this, pilot. Archive all biographical data. I want continuous surveillance on this individual from this point forward. Her aide Nix processed the command with visible confusion rippling across her green-tinted features, the biomechanical implants at her temples flickering with neural activity. Your Highness, this contradicts our primary observation protocols. We do not track individual primitives unless they represent strategic threats to imperial interests. Selena's eyes, violet and ancient, despite her youthful appearance containing depths that suggested she'd seen civilizations rise and fall, while humans still lived in caves, remained fixed on the retreating F-15 as it vectored back toward friendly territory. That moment, he chose honor when doctrine demanded killing. I need to understand if this represents their species or merely an anomaly worth studying. The memory dissolved like morning fog burned away by Nevada sun. Jack Mitchell woke at 04:30 on a Tuesday morning in September 2025 in a single-wide trailer at the edge of Skyline Airfield, 37 miles northeast of Zone X, where the aliens had carved out their territorial concession after humanity realized it couldn't fight them and survive. The dream, never quite a nightmare, just an endless loop of choices that couldn't be unmade, faded as consciousness dragged him back to reality with the subtle cruelty of another day that wouldn't care about his regrets. He was 62 years old. His knees hurt with the kind of persistent ache that came from too many high-G maneuvers and too many hard landings on aircraft carriers that weren't quite where the landing signal officers said they'd be. His back hurt from compressed vertebrae that the flight surgeons had warned him about 20 years ago. The persistent cough that had started 6 months ago rattled in his chest like loose bolts in an engine housing. He swung his legs off the mattress and sat there in the pre-dawn darkness, letting his body remember how to be vertical. The alarm clock's red numerals glowed with accusatory brightness, 4:30. Same as it had been for 40 years of military discipline, a habit that refused to die just because the uniform no longer fit and the Pentagon had stopped returning his calls. Physical training came next because that's what you did when you'd spent 4 decades being a soldier. Push-ups on the trailer's buckled linoleum floor, 50 down from the 200 he'd managed at 28 but still respectable. Sit-ups that made his lower back protest. Stretches that made joints pop in ways that would have horrified his younger self. A 3-mile run along the perimeter fence as the desert sky shifted from black to gray to pale blue, his breath coming harder than it should, his pace slower than he wanted to admit. The fence marked the boundary between the civilian airfield and the restricted zone where Zarelian vessels came and went with the casual arrogance of an occupying force that didn't need permission. By 6 o'clock, he was at the airfield proper. Coffee in a battered thermos that had seen him through 2 wars and a dozen conflicts that officially never happened, wearing coveralls that smelled of engine oil and resignation. Skyline Airfield consisted of 2 runways, one hangar that had seen better days, and a collection of light aircraft in various states of repair that had belonged to rich weekenders who kept their toys here because it was far enough from Las Vegas to avoid busy airspace, but close enough to Zone X to feel dangerously adventurous when they told their friends about it. Tom Morrison, the airfield's owner, found him elbow deep in a Cessna 172's engine compartment shortly after sunrise. Tom was 45, ex-Air Force himself, discharged after an injury in Afghanistan that left him with a permanent limp and a pension that barely covered the airfield's operating costs. He understood what it meant to be a warrior without a war. Tom set down 2 fresh cups of coffee on the workbench, steam rising in the cool morning air. "General, you flew Blackbirds over Russia during the Cold War. You've got Medal of Honor citations and classified commendations stacked in some Pentagon basement." Jack didn't look up from the engine. The carburetor needed adjustment. The timing was off, details that mattered if you wanted the aircraft to clear the mountains without choking out. "Your point." Tom's voice carried the careful tone of a man who'd rehearsed this conversation. "My point is, you're fixing Cessnas for weekend tourists. You should be teaching at Nellis, consulting for defense. Something that isn't this." The wrench slipped and Jack's knuckles scraped metal opening skin, weathered by decades of sun and wind. A thin line of blood welled up. He grabbed a shop rag. "Cessnas don't judge, they just fly when you treat them right." Tom wasn't finished. 2021. "Pentagon forced you out because you said the aliens weren't hostile. Turns out you were right. They negotiated Zone X instead of glassing our cities. Doesn't that eat at you, being right and getting punished for it?" Jack's jaw tightened. The memory was fresh despite 4 years standing in that conference room, presenting 3 years of data showing Zarellian vessels in defensive formations. His analysis dismissed as wishful thinking. His career ended because he dared to suggest diplomacy before destruction. General Myers had called it fear disguised as analysis, called him obsolete, called security to escort him out. His voice emerged flat. "Being right doesn't matter when you're already out the door. I was 58, expendable, and arguing against the prevailing narrative. Math was never in my favor." Tom opened his mouth to respond, but movement in the northern sky cut him off. Both men looked up simultaneously. Old combat instincts recognizing anomalous flight patterns before conscious thought could process what they were seeing. The Zarellian scout ship descended from cloudless sky with smooth precision that made human aerospace engineering look primitive. Triangular, maybe 30 feet on each side hull, shimmering with that peculiar metallic organic hybrid material that Earth scientists still couldn't replicate. It landed 200 meters from the main hangar, without raising dust, without disturbing air gravitational manipulation that defied Newton. Jack wiped his hands and walked toward the ship with the unhurried gait of a man who'd been expecting this visit for years. Tom stayed by the hangar, smart enough to recognize when interference would just make things worse. The ship's access ramp extended as Jack approached, matter reorganizing at molecular level. Nix emerged, all lean muscle and barely contained aggression wrapped in light armor. 6 feet tall, green skin with blue undertones, features humanoid enough to be recognizable, but alien enough to trigger uncanny valley responses. Her hand rested on the plasma weapon at her hip. Jack stopped 10 feet away and crossed his arms. "I've been waiting. You're 47 minutes late. Traffic in orbit must have been brutal." Nix's violet eyes widened fractionally. Her voice emerged with a harmonics that made the air vibrate. "How did you know we would come?" Jack tilted his head toward Zone X, shimmering in the heat haze. "Your sensor signature. Same as 1989 over Montana when you were running reconnaissance on our ICBM fields. Distinctive frequency pattern like a fingerprint. 3.7 terahertz emission band pulsed every 14 seconds. You've flown this route every third Tuesday for 36 years, punctual as atomic clocks until today." The plasma weapon came out, but Nix's professional mask had slipped. "That information is classified at highest Imperial security levels." "How does a primitive—" Jack's laugh was dry. "Primitive. I was flying in the intercept missions. SR-71 Blackbird reconnaissance. We noticed. We logged every encounter, built profiles, learned your schedules. I probably know your flight patterns are better than your own navigation officers." He paused, letting that sink in. "I spent my life watching the skies. Eventually you learn what belongs and what's visiting." Nix touched her forearm, spoke in rapid Zarellian, received a response that made her expression shift through surprise towards something resembling respect. When she spoke again, the aggression had drained. "The Queen requests your presence, General Mitchell. Immediately. This is not negotiable." Jack glanced back at Tom, watching from the office window at the Cessna still sitting with the ceiling open. 40 years of military discipline said you didn't leave a job half-finished, but 40 years of tactical training said that when the enemy's highest authority requested a meeting, you accepted the intelligence opportunity. He turned back to Nix, lead the way. But if this is about that parking ticket from 2 weeks ago, I'm pleading not guilty. The journey to Crystal Spire took 20 minutes through airspace that human aircraft weren't cleared to enter. Jack studied everything: guard positions, patrol patterns, structural weak points, visible in the architecture. Old reconnaissance habits died hard. Nix watched him catalog defenses with what might have been approval in a species where professional competence transcended tribal loyalty. The corridor leading to Selena's throne room displayed carved reliefs showing Xyrelian history, conquests, honor duels, family crests. Jack paused at one depicting a warrior sparing a fallen enemy. Nix's voice carried unexpected emotion. Ancient. Before we eliminated such weakness from our culture. Jack studied the carving. Interesting word choice. Eliminated, not evolved past. The throne room held 8 council members arranged in precise hierarchy. Kale occupied the position nearest the throne, his scarred face legacy of combat that had taught him violence without mercy, twisted into expression that suggested Jack's presence offended him personally. Selena sat elevated above them all, green-blue skin, silver hair, violet eyes appearing 40 despite being centuries old. Regal, but not cold. Calculating, but not cruel. Her voice carried harmonics that resonated in Jack's chest. General Jack Mitchell, call sign Reaper, 52 confirmed kills during Desert Storm, SR-71 reconnaissance pilot, tactical advisor for 3 administrations. Jack met her eyes without flinching. 53, Your Majesty, one wasn't officially recorded. The council members shifted uneasy at a human correcting their queen. Kale stepped forward, his voice carrying barely suppressed rage. This primitive corrects our queen. Insolence demands. Selena's hand rose fractionally. Counselor Kale, the general speaks as warriors speak. Truth over flattery. I appreciate the distinction. She turned back to Jack, something in her expression suggesting this meeting had been planned longer than today's summons indicated. I don't correct queens for sport. I correct them because facts matter more than politics. Holographic displays activated around the throne, showing military formations Jack recognized immediately. 117 capital ships in tight formation trajectory vectors pointed at Saul's system. His tactical mind processed the data. Automatically invasion force, coordinated assault, overwhelming firepower designed to crush resistance before defenders could organize. Selena's voice cut through his analysis. My father's invasion fleet. They arrive in 4 to 6 months. He believes Earth represents threat that must be neutralized through conquest. The casual way she said it, like discussing weather instead of species extinction, told Jack this was test. She was watching his reaction, measuring whether he'd panic or think. He chose thinking. You're telling me this because you disagree with your father's assessment. Otherwise, I'd already be dead, and Earth would be receiving ultimatums instead of visits. Selena's expression shifted fractionally toward approval. I need you to train an integration unit, 7 humans, 7 Xyrelians. Prove cooperation produces results neither species can achieve alone. If you succeed, I can present evidence to the Council that Earth brings more value as ally than conquest. If you fail, the invasion proceeds and billions die. Jack processed variables faster than conscious thought: timeline, resources, probability of success, cost of failure, measured in human extinction. The math was terrible. But terrible odds beat no odds. Conditions: full tactical authority, or no interference from council members with agendas that conflict with success. I run this operation my way or not at all. Kale's voice dripped venom. You dare demand? Selena cut him off with tone that brooked no argument. Agreed, you have 8 weeks to produce results. Fail and your species becomes historical footnote. Succeed and you prevent a war. She extended her hand, palm up. A blade appeared from somewhere in her sleeve, sharp enough to part skin without pressure. She drew it across her palm, green blood welling instantly. She offered the blade to Jack, blood oath. In my culture, this binds beyond death. Betrayal brings eternal dishonor. Jack took the blade, cut his own palm without hesitation, pressed bleeding hand to bleeding hand. Their blood mixed human red and Xyrelian green, combining into color that belonged to neither species. In my culture, a handshake works, but I respect the intent. 8 weeks. I'll deliver. The training facility sat at Zone X's edge, abandoned military installation that Cold War paranoia had built and budget cuts had forgotten. Jack arrived at dawn with 14 recruits arranged in two groups, separated by invisible but absolute line, 7 humans on one side, 7 Cyrelians on the other. The humans wore expressions ranging from suspicion to hostility. The Xyrelians maintained professional detachment that looked like contempt if you didn't know better. Jack studied them individually. Marcus 23 Marine Corps infantry jaw clenched with anger that radiated like heat. His father had died in 2023 during the diplomatic incident that triggered Zone X negotiations. The kid wanted revenge, dressed up as duty. Sarah Kim 22 Air Force Intelligence brilliant analyst who decoded more Xyrelian communication patterns than anyone else in the program, but looked at the floor when anyone asked her opinion. Genius wrapped in crippling self-doubt. Brooks 25 Army combat engineer methodical and precise, the kind of soldier who'd rather build than destroy, but could do both with equal competence. Rodriguez 24 Navy swimmer and small unit tactics specialist, cocky in the way that either got you promoted or killed depending on whether you could back it up. The Xyrelians presented different challenge. Lyra 21 pale blue skin, silver hair, isolated by 3 feet of empty space that none of her species would cross. Exile marked in posture and expression. Her father had advocated for peace. They'd executed him for it. Vor 24 earnest and questioning biomechanical implants at his temples, marking him as technical specialist. His body language suggested someone wrestling with the ideology that no longer fit observations. Kira 23 female aggressive stance that suggested she resented being assigned to prove cooperation with species she'd been taught to consider inferior. Dax 26 scarred and professional oldest of the Cyrelian group, watching everything with Predator's focus. 6 others, human and Xyrelian both, whose names Jack would learn through training rather than briefing packets. He walked to the center point between the groups, forcing them to turn toward him rather than maintaining opposing formations. You're looking at me thinking I'm old, thinking I'm washed up, thinking I can't possibly teach you anything useful. You're right about some of that. I'm 62, my knees hurt, I need reading glasses. Can't run 6-minute miles anymore. He paused, let that settle, then continued. But I can outthink every one of you. In war, brains beat bodies. Experience defeats youth. Wisdom trumps strength. 8 weeks from now, you'll understand why. Or you'll wash out and someone else gets the chance to prevent the extinction of your species. Kira's voice carried challenge. What can a human teach Xyrelians about combat? We've conquered 300 worlds while you were still throwing rocks. Jack smiled without humor. January 19, 1991, Al-Taqadum Air Base, Iraq. 6 F-15 Eagles versus 18 MiG-29 Fulcrums. Math said we lose 3, maybe 4 aircraft. Instead, we destroyed 14 planes, 32 SAM sites, and a command center. 0 losses. He manipulated the tactical board, showing formations and maneuvers. We won through deception, fake squadrons, split formations, ghost signatures that made them see double the actual numbers. Sun Tzu wrote it 2,500 years ago. All warfare is deception. Still true today, still true tomorrow. Technology changes, tactics adapt. But principles are eternal. The recruits leaned forward despite themselves, drawn by competence that transcended species bias. Jack pressed the advantage. You're not here to learn how to kill efficiently. Your species both excel at that. You're here to learn how to think differently. How to see opportunities where doctrine sees only obstacles. How to turn weakness into strength and strength into victory. Brooks raised his hand, engineer's mind already processing variables. Sir, what's the actual objective? What are we training for? Jack appreciated directness. In 6 months, maybe less, an invasion fleet arrives carrying enough firepower to glass Earth's continents. Your mission is to prove that human-Xyrelian cooperation produces capabilities neither species achieves alone. You do that convincingly, the invasion gets called off. You fail, 8 billion people die, and you get to live with knowing you could have prevented it. The weight of that settled over them like gravity increase. Marcus's anger had shifted from unfocused rage towards something more directed. Sarah looked up from the floor, eyes meeting Jack's for the first time. Vor's bioluminescent markings flickered with patterns, suggesting emotional response his species wasn't supposed to display. The training simulation activated without warning. Defensive scenario, hostile drones inbound, simulated plasma fire that would register as kills if it connected. Standard exercise that every military on Earth used for basic qualification. Jack watched from the control booth while his recruits scrambled into position, their movements revealing everything about training temperament and tactical thinking. The humans defaulted to Earth standard doctrine, establish fire lanes, concentrate, force, eliminate threats through superior firepower. The Xyrelians used their species' preferred approach, technological superiority, energy shields, precision targeting that wasted nothing. Both approaches were effective in isolation. Neither was optimal for the scenario Jack had designed. The drones adapted to both strategies, simultaneously exploiting human limitations and Xyrelian predictability with AI that learned faster than biology adapted. Within 3 minutes, the exercise had become disaster. Within 5, it was massacre. The simulation ended with 12 of 14 recruits marked as casualties, objectives, unmet, failure, total, and absolute. Jack's voice cut through the silence that followed. You fought as 2 separate groups, humans using human tactics, Xyrelians using Xyrelian doctrine. The enemy adapted to both because you gave them 2 problems instead of 1 impossible problem. You failed because you didn't cooperate. Marcus's frustration boiled over. How are we supposed to cooperate when we don't know each other's capabilities, when we're using different equipment and speaking different tactical languages? Jack nodded. Exactly the right question. Tomorrow we start learning those capabilities, learning that tactical language. 8 weeks from now, you'll move as 1 unit. Today you're strangers forced together by circumstance. Eventually you'll be family. That's how this works. That's how we prevent the war. The simulation reactivated without authorization, safety protocols disabling simultaneously, targeting systems switching from training mode to live fire without warning or explanation. Jack saw it instantly. Authorization codes traced to KL's personal override signature. The counselor wanted failure badly enough to murder 14 recruits to ensure it. Jack's hands flew across controls, voice cutting through panic with parade ground authority. All units, this is not simulation. Not. Live weapons, active, defensive scatter pattern, Eagle Delta. Move now. The recruits froze for 1 precious second, minds struggling to process that training had become lethal. Then training took over, bodies moving before conscious thought could interfere. Marcus led the human wing into evasive maneuvers, Rodriguez and Brooks providing covering fire, while Sarah calculated firing solutions that anticipated drone positioning instead of reacting to current location. The Xyrelians responded with practiced efficiency, Dax coordinating defensive shields, while Kira and Vor engaged with precision fire that would have been impossible for human reflexes. But they operated separately, 2 tactical approaches that didn't intersect or support exactly the weakness Jack had been highlighting. Lyra saw it first, the gap in coordination, the moment where human mobility and Xyrelian firepower could combine into something neither achieved alone. Her voice cut across comm channels in accented but clear English. Human wing break, left on my mark, for concentrate, fire grid 7-3. Marcus didn't hesitate, trusting analysis over species loyalty. The humans broke left exactly as Lyra called it, drawing drone fire into predetermined kill zone where Xyrelian weapons could engage without risk of friendly fire. The drones optimized for separate human and Xyrelian responses failed to adapt to integrated tactics fast enough. 17 minutes after the attack began, 14 recruits stood alive in the training bay, surrounded by destroyed drones and the smell of overheated weapons. 3 injuries, none critical. 0 fatalities. Success measured not in victory, but survival against odds deliberately stacked for failure. Selena arrived with royal guards and rage that made the air pressure drop. Kale stood in the observation booth wearing an expression that hadn't expected witnesses to survive and testify. The evidence was overwhelming, his authorization codes, his personal encryption signature, His presence in the control system at exactly the moment safety protocols failed. Jack's voice carried exhaustion and fury in equal measure. Someone tried to murder my recruits. Professional sabotage, internal access authorization at council level. Either you deal with this now or I walk and take my people with me. Selena's eyes found Kaisil in the booth, held his gaze with intensity that suggested communication occurring on frequencies humans couldn't perceive. Counselor, you will submit to investigation. If evidence confirms involvement, consequences will be severe. Kale smiled confident in protections that politics provided to those born into power. I welcome investigation, Your Majesty. I have nothing to hide. But Jack saw the calculation in those eyes, the arrogance of someone who'd gotten away with worse and expected to continue the pattern. This wasn't over. It was barely beginning. Marcus found Jack in the medical bay after dark fury barely contained beneath marine discipline. We know it was Kyle. We have the evidence. Why aren't we arresting him now? Jack pressed, tissue to his mouth, hiding the red stain that wouldn't stop coming. Because arrogant enemies make mistakes, we let him think he's winning that we suspect in but can't prove that next time he'll be more careful instead of more bold. Patient hunting produces better results than reactive vengeance. Marcus stared at the tissue in Jack's hand, recognition dawning with the horror of someone who'd watched family die but the same way. You're sick, really sick. That's not injury bleeding, that's. Jack met his eyes without deflection. Stage 4 lung cancer. Metastatic, 4 months maximum, according to the doctors, probably 3 with the stress I'm maintaining, which means I have exactly enough time to finish training you before biology shuts me down, so we don't waste time on things I can't change. The kid's hands shook with emotion that transcended anger into grief for someone not yet dead. You're training us while dying. Why? What's the point of? Jack's voice cut through the spiral. Because every war is mine if I can prevent it. Because 8 billion lives matter more than my comfortable final months. Because legacy isn't what you leave behind when you die. It's what you put into others that keeps working after you are gone. I've got time to finish this. Let me use it properly. Marcus stood silent, processing mortality that made abstract timelines concrete and immediate. When he spoke again, his voice had lost the anger that had defined him. What do you need from us? Jack smiled despite pain that was becoming constant companion. Stop being angry at Zarelians for killing your father. Start being purposeful about preventing others from losing theirs. Rage makes you dangerous to everyone, including yourself. Purpose makes you dangerous only to those who deserve it. Learn the difference. He pulled himself upright, vertebrae grinding in protest lungs, laboring against fluid accumulation that would eventually drown him from the inside. Tomorrow we train harder. Week 2 starts at 0600. Get rest, you'll need it. The abandoned Cold War bunker complex sat 40 miles into Nevada desert, where the government had once stored nuclear warheads and paranoid fantasies about Soviet first strikes. Week 1. Temperature gauge mounted to the bunker's exterior wall read 112 degrees at 1400 hours. Heat that made metal fixtures painful to touch with bare skin made water evaporate faster than biology could replace it. Jack sat cross-legged in the bunker's main chamber, where concrete walls held cooler air. The recruits arranged themselves in a rough circle, that invisible line between species mostly dissolved after 6 days of joint operations. They passed water containers between them, human canteens mixing with Zyrelian hydration units. Nobody spoke. Speaking required energy they didn't have after 12 hours of survival drills. Marcus sat closest to Jack, jaw still clenched, but with less rage and more focus. The kid's father had left him a leather journal filled with tactical observations and hard-learned lessons. Marcus carried it everywhere, read it during breaks, absorbed wisdom across the generational gap. The silence stretched until Jack decided it had gone long enough. His voice emerged rough from dehydration. 1985. I was flying SR-71 reconnaissance over Soviet airspace classified mission that officially never happened. We called her the Blackbird. Titanium skin, twin engines, cruised at Mach 3.2 at 85,000 feet, where the sky turns purple and you can see Earth's curve. 14 pairs of eyes focused on him, grateful for distraction from their misery. Vor leaned forward. What happened? Jack took measured sip from his canteen. We were over Kamchatka Peninsula photographing submarine pens the Russians thought were hidden. Left engine quit at 80,000 feet. Temperature differential, metal fatigue, manufacturing defect. Pick your cause, doesn't matter when you're falling out of the sky over hostile territory. Sarah's voice emerged barely above whisper. You didn't eject. Jack nodded. Manual said eject, standard procedure. But getting captured over USSR meant torture interrogation. Everything I knew about our reconnaissance capabilities extracted through methods medieval inquisitors would study. Every flight pattern, every sensor package, every pilot in the program compromised, because I followed the manual. He paused, letting them process. So I rode that bird home on one engine, fought her through re-entry heating that wasn't designed for single-engine operation, landed at Beale Air Force Base on fumes and prayers, and hoped that physics would cooperate long enough. Marcus's analytical mind engaged. They don't teach that in training. Flying on one engine at 80,000 feet. Jack's laugh carried no humor. They teach you to eject, but being captured meant putting everyone who depended on me staying free at risk. Hard choices don't get easier with practice. You just get better at living with the consequences. The invisible line had shifted to 6 inches, barely noticeable, except Jack had spent 40 years watching for small changes that indicated larger shifts in group dynamics. Progress measured in microscopic adjustments. Brooks raised a practical question. Sir, if that happened today, would you make the same choice? Jack considered the question seriously. Today I'm 62 with terminal cancer and nothing to lose. At 28, I had everything to lose and made the choice anyway. So yes, probably. Some principles don't change with age. They just get tested more often. Week 2 brought individual bonding moments that transformed strangers into unit. Marcus's rage had been useful for getting through selection, but was liability for sustained operations. Jack pulled him aside during hand-to-hand drill, where the kid had attacked too aggressively, nearly injured his sparring partner. Jack's voice cut through the adrenaline. Your father, how'd he die? Marcus's fists clenched. 2023. Diplomatic incident. Friendly fire from our side shot down Zarelian vessel. He was aboard investigating first contact protocols. Jack nodded. And now you're training with them, learning to trust them with your life. Marcus broke. I don't know if I can do this. Every time I look at them, I see the species that killed him. Even though it was our missiles. Even though it was mistake. The rage doesn't care about logic. Jack handed him the after-action reports from Gulf War operations, his own documentation from decades past. Read these, see how many times rage almost got me killed, almost got my wingmen killed. Learn from my mistakes instead of repeating them. Your father's journal is full of the same lessons. Honor him by learning them. Lyra sat alone during meals, isolated by 3 feet of empty space that none of her species would cross. Cultural enforcement of social exile. Her father had advocated for peace. They'd executed him publicly to discourage similar thoughts. Jack approached with his meal, ignored the way conversation died around them as he settled beside her. Lyra stiffened. You should not sit here, General. My presence compromises your standing. Jack opened his protein ration. 1991, Gulf War. Iraqi pilots defected to coalition bases, flew their MiGs across the border, asking for asylum. Smart ones saw which way history was going. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. We called them heroes. Takes more guts to stand against your own than fight for them. Easy to follow the crowd, hard to look at your culture and say maybe we're wrong, maybe there's a better way. Lyra's hands unclenched slightly. They killed my father for advocating what you're building here. Integration, cooperation. Jack acknowledged the weight without diminishing it. Then honor him. Show them peace takes more strength than war. Prove they were wrong by becoming living evidence his vision worked. The 3 feet remained, but something in Lyra's posture shifted from defensive isolation toward cautious acceptance. Week 3 brought Sarah and Vor together through tactical exercise requiring joint problem solving. The scenario involved extracting intelligence package from fortified position with limited resources. Vor approached it with Zyrelian directness, superior technology, established doctrine, force application that assumed better weapons meant victory. Sarah studied the problem silently, finding gaps in sensor timing that Vor's cultural conditioning made invisible. Her analysis identified vulnerability in the overlap patterns, blind spot lasting 0.73 seconds, when systems conflicted through engineering accident rather than design. But Sarah didn't speak up. Vore continued proposing solutions that worked but carried unacceptable casualties. Jack's voice cut across discussion. Sarah, share your plan. Vore, listen. Sarah flushed with embarrassment, words fighting to escape. The sensor timing creates gap. 0.73 seconds. If someone fast enough, human physiology went through while someone else carried suppression equipment. Vore's expression shifted through confusion to recognition. The overlap blind spot. I didn't see it because I was looking for technological solutions instead of tactical ones. That's brilliant. Jack nodded. Sarah thinks different because she's human. Vore brings capabilities she doesn't have. That's the point. You're not competing, you're completing each other. They executed Sarah's plan flawlessly, provided living proof that integration wasn't political theater, but tactical advantage. Afterward, they sat together analyzing the exercise, Sarah explaining human analytical frameworks, while Vore detailed Zyrelian technological capabilities. The first real friendship forming across species divide. Night descended with sudden finality. Temperature plummeted from daytime brutality to cold that made breath visible. The recruits gathered outside despite temperature sitting in rough circle on sand still warm from day's heat, looking up at stars blazing with impossible clarity. Vore broke the silence. Those stars. Your ancestors looked at the same ones, wondered if anyone was looking back. Marcus, who'd been reading his father's journal, stared upward. And now we know. You were looking. For how long? Vore's harmonics suggested emotional complexity. 300 Earth years. Watching, studying, trying to understand if you'd kill us or join us. The answer was yes to both. Laughter rippled through the group, tentative but genuine. Lyra spoke from her position slightly outside the circle. In Zyrelian philosophy, we divide species into three categories. Prey to be consumed, predators to be destroyed, partners to be tested. You're the first species to reach the third category in 4,000 years. Sarah asked, how do we pass the test? Jack's voice emerged from where he sat, slightly apart. By proving cooperation produces results neither achieves alone. By showing the Empire that Earth brings value as ally, we'd never bring as conquest. By becoming living evidence that the old way costs more than it gains. The invisible line separating species had dissolved entirely in starlight bodies intermingled without conscious thought. Small changes, microscopic progress, foundation of something that might survive contact with real-world's complexity. Week 3's high-altitude simulation brought catastrophe disguised as routine. Jack stood in command center calling tactics, voice steady, despite lungs that protested every breath. The cough hit without warning, violent and impossible to suppress. His chest seized diaphragm spasming. Blood sprayed across the command console, bright red mixed with darker clots. Jack's knees buckled. Hands grabbed him from multiple directions, human and Zyrelian both lowering him to the floor. Marcus's face appeared in his fading vision. I've seen this before. My father, the last 6 months. The Zyrelian medical technician arrived with equipment humming at biological resonance frequencies. Sensors penetrated deeper than X-rays. Readings appeared on holographic displays showing his thoracic cavity in 3 dimensions. Both lungs compromised tumors, metastasizing through tissue meant for oxygen exchange, airways constricting, as cancer colonized space meant for life. The technician's voice carried clinical detachment. Advanced carcinoma, both lungs, metastatic to lymph nodes and pleural cavity, 4 months maximum survival, 3 months with sustained physical stress. Jack pushed himself upright, despite hands trying to keep him horizontal, focused on displays showing 14 aircraft holding formation. Then I better teach faster. Resume training. Pattern Delta 7, maintain altitude discipline. Marcus crouched beside him, hands shaking. You're dying to train children. Jack met his eyes. Every war is mine if I can prevent it. I've got exactly enough time to finish this. Let me use it. The recruits filed into command center after simulation ended, surrounding Jack in a circle that felt ceremonial. Lyra stepped forward, burst of violet eyes bright with moisture, her hand extended toward Jack's forehead. In Zyrelian tradition, dying warriors pass knowledge through memory binding. Sacred obligation ensures wisdom survives when body fails. I will remember everything you teach. Honor bound. Her fingertips touched his forehead, and something passed between them. The other Zarelian recruits followed one by one, touching foreheads in ritual predating their empire's expansion. Then humans joined hands on shoulders or foreheads, 13 young warriors making unspoken promises. Jack's throat tightened. I don't know your tradition. Don't understand full implications. But I accept the intent. I'll teach you everything. Pass on 40 years of experience. Trust you'll use it better than I did. Somewhere in Zone X, Kale watched through surveillance feeds and smiled with satisfaction, carrying malice underneath. He touched the communication device implanted at his temple. Accelerate Phase 2. The human is compromised. Eliminate him while he's weak. Week 5 brought clear skies and perfect flying weather. Jack requested the F-15X hybrid fighter for testing, wanted to verify integrated systems responded to human input properly. The aircraft waited at dusk, maintenance crews finishing pre-flight checks. Nix appeared as he completed walk-around inspection. General Mitchell the Queen requests you delay this flight. Security concerns indicate possible. Jack cut her off. Note the concern. Flight proceeds as scheduled. 30 minutes full envelope test. Tell Selena I appreciate the worry, but I've been flying experimental aircraft since before your birth. The cockpit felt familiar despite alien technology. Controls responded where muscle memory expected them. Engine start sequence proceeded nominally, twin turbines spooling up with sound that made pilots' hindbrains release endorphins. Tower cleared him for departure. Jack rotated at calculated airspeed, felt the aircraft leave Earth with smooth transition, climbed through 15,000 feet, running system checks. Everything performed within acceptable parameters. Perfect flight, clear air. The starboard engine exploded at 15,300 feet with catastrophic finality. The turbine disintegrated from inside compressor blades, shedding at supersonic velocity titanium fragments, penetrating containment. Fire warnings screamed every system demanding immediate attention. Jack's hands moved through emergency procedures drilled so deeply that conscious thought wasn't required. Shut down dying engine. Assess damage to control surfaces. Calculate glide ratio and available altitude and distance to suitable landing zones. Highway 95 ran parallel 2 miles south straight in empty asphalt surface that would tear landing gear off but might leave fuselage intact. Tower's voice crackled. Eagle 1, we show catastrophic engine failure. Eject aircraft is expendable. Jack's voice emerged ice cold. Negative ejection, too close to Henderson suburbs. Population density unacceptable for ballistic debris scatter. I'm putting her on Highway 95. Landing gear deployed successfully despite hydraulic warnings. Jack lined up using visual reference because heads-up display had failed. Airspeed decaying through 150 knots, sync rate manageable. Civilian vehicles ahead, late commuters. He keyed emergency frequency, all ground traffic on Highway 95 near mile marker 174. Emergency aircraft landing in progress, clear to the road immediately. The F-15X touched down harder than any instructor would accept, but softer than physics demanded, landing gear taking impact before collapsing as designed, belly contacting asphalt with scream of tortured metal. The aircraft slid 1,700 feet before momentum exhausted itself. Jack sat in cockpit breathing air that tasted of smoke and ozone, checking extremities that all reported functional. Investigation took 14 hours and produced evidence of professional sabotage. Fuel line tampering, exactly the kind that would look natural unless you knew what damage patterns indicated deliberate action. Forensic team traced tools to Kale's personal maintenance equipment, found DNA placing his subordinates in the maintenance bay during pre-flight prep window. Marcus found Jack in medical bay at 0300. We arrest him now, tonight, forced Selena's hand. Jack shook his head. Not yet. Arrogant enemies make mistakes. Let him think he's winning, that we don't suspect him. He'll get bolder, expose the full conspiracy. Patient hunting produces better results. Sarah appeared with data tablets. General, I've been tracking unusual encrypted traffic between Zone X and deep space coordinates. Transmission patterns match KL's encryption signature. He's communicating with someone outside our solar system. Jack studied the data. Fleet coordination. He's feeding intelligence to the invasion force, providing real-time updates on training progress, Earth's defensive capabilities, internal divisions they could exploit. Classic fifth column operation. Vor joined them, face twisted with shame. My people, some of them want this integration to fail. Prefer conquest and subjugation, certainty of hierarchy, maintained through force. If training succeeds, it undermines everything they believe about species relationships. The pieces assembled into picture none of them wanted to see. Kale represented faction possibly large that would rather start war than accept peaceful coexistence. Training wasn't just about 14 recruits. It was about proving concept that threatened entire foundation of Zyrelian military culture. Jack pushed himself upright. Everyone's tactical, using myself as bait, hoping KL gets aggressive enough to expose his network. But we're running out of time. I've got maybe 6 weeks before the cancer shuts down lung function completely. Selena arrived at 0430, dismissed everyone except Jack, waited until doors sealed. 34 years I've watched you, time to show you why. The holographic projector activated. Images filled the medical bay with three-dimensional fidelity. 1989 Montana airspace, younger Jack, flying SR-71 while Zyrelian observers monitored from orbit. 1991 Desert Storm, the dogfight compressed into 30 seconds of tactical perfection, followed by mercy. 2001 through 2020 training missions and advisory roles, and 100 moments where he'd chosen teaching over glory. Selena's voice carried weight accumulated over centuries. I needed proof my father was wrong about humanity, needed evidence your species could evolve beyond violence as default solution. You became that evidence. Every choice documented, every moment of restraint analyzed. She manipulated the hologram, zoomed on specific moment from 1991. Iraqi pilot ejecting Jack's finger, lifting from weapons release. The footage continued past that moment, showed the pilot landing safely, showed Iraqi ground forces capturing him, showed years compressed into seconds. The pilot Rashid Al-Takriti survived the war, became physician working refugee camps. His daughter joined WHO-supervised vaccination programs, saving thousands across conflict zones. Selena's eyes met Jack's. Your one act of mercy created ripples you never knew existed. Rashid raised 3 children who became medical professionals. His daughter saved 3,000 confirmed lives. His son researches infectious disease. His youngest teaches pediatric medicine. All because you chose not to fire on January 17, 1991. Jack's throat closed. You've been watching me since I was 28, cataloging every decision. Why tell me now? Selena's face shifted through expressions suggesting internal conflict. Because you deserve to know your life mattered. To someone who was watching from the beginning. You became the evidence I needed to oppose my father's invasion plans. Without you, Earth would have been subjugated in 2023. The weight of 34 years settled onto Jack's shoulders. He coughed, tasted blood. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, and simultaneously the most invasive violation of privacy I've experienced. Not sure whether to be flattered or horrified. Selena's expression shifted towards something resembling humor. Be neither, be ready. Kale knows about our connection. We'll use it against us both. The Council demands your training program show results before the invasion fleet arrives. Otherwise, they authorize immediate conquest. Jack absorbed the information. When does the fleet arrive? Selena's voice carried certainty. 4 to 6 months. They've been accelerating timeline, pushing engines beyond safe parameters. We have less time than I hoped. Week 8 arrived with inevitability of Judgment Day finally demanding resolution. The final test waited: graduate these recruits or admit failure. Kale had assembled 20 Royal Guard veterans, elite soldiers who'd conquered worlds. They would simulate attacking Earth installation using lethal force authorized under training protocols. Jack gathered them in pre-dawn darkness, 14 young faces looking at him with trust. He didn't deserve but would honor with everything remaining. Whatever happens today, remember you're not human. Squad and Zyrelian squad, you're one unit, brothers and sisters, family. They stacked hands in center of circle, human and alien together. Marcus's voice carried across silence. For the General. 13 voices answered, for the General. The simulation began at 0600 with textbook precision. 20 Royal Guard veterans executing attack patterns refined through millennia. The 14 recruits defended using integrated strategy combining human flexibility with Xyrelian superiority. For 17 minutes, it looked like success. Then Jack's command console flashed red warnings. Every safety protocol disabled simultaneously, authorization codes traced to Kael's override signature. Simulation had become live fire without anyone's consent. Jack's voice cut across all channels. All units not simulation, defensive protocol. Omega Live weapons confirmed. Recruits reacted with speed, vindicating 8 weeks of training. Marcus led Human Wing into evasive maneuvers borrowed from Desert Storm. Lyra commanded Xyrelian group using integrated approach, treating humans as equals. Sarah saw the gap in attack pattern, veterans assuming traditional response, unprepared for creative tactics violating doctrine. She called audible, nobody anticipated. Flanking pattern, Seven Brooks take high, Rodriguez sweep low. The maneuver shouldn't have worked. Mathematics said experience would anticipate and counter. But Sarah had analyzed Guard's tactical history, found patterns repeated across centuries, identified habits, so ingrained they'd become predictable. Vor took plasma fire meant for Marcus shield systems, absorbing damage. We're brothers now. Your survival is mine. The engagement lasted 17 minutes and produced 0 fatalities despite live weapons. Royal Guard veterans retreated in disarray, defeated by children training 8 weeks against soldiers fighting centuries. Proof of concept demonstrated through violence that almost became massacre, but ended as vindication. Command center filled with Royal Council and U.S. military observers and Selena. Jack presented evidence impossible to gather without Sarah's brilliance and his paranoia. Communication logs showing Kael's coordination with invasion fleet. Financial records proving funding of hardliner faction. Personal correspondence revealing plot to sabotage training, eliminate Jack, ensure failure, justifying conquest. Royal Guards arrested Kael with efficiency, suggesting they'd been waiting for legal justification. He smiled as they secured his wrist. You fools celebrate graduation, while invasion fleet arrives in 36 hours instead of months. We accelerated timeline weeks ago. Your 14 recruiters mean nothing against 117 capital ships. The revelation hit like physical blow. 36 hours, fleet 3 times larger than intelligence estimates. Arrival imminent rather than distant theoretical threat. Everything accomplished rendered meaningless by math. Marcus turned to Jack with desperation. General, what do we do? Jack's mind raced through tactical scenarios. Conventional approaches rejected because conventional thinking got you killed facing impossible odds. But there was one approach from Desert Storm that nobody expected: deception at scale, impossible to maintain against technologically superior observers. Unless you made them see what they expected rather than what existed, we don't fight their war. We make them fight ours. I need full sensor access and permission to violate every protocol you have. Selena's eyes widened with understanding from 34 years watching Jack choose unexpected options. You're planning deception campaign, making them see defenses that don't exist. Jack nodded. Desert Storm, January 1991. Coalition forces convinced Iraq they were facing twice actual numbers through radio deception, false supply columns, electronic warfare. The war you're watching isn't the war being fought, but someone has to infiltrate their command show, sell the lie from inside where they'll believe it. Someone with nothing left to lose. Marcus understood, first face going pale. No, absolutely not. Jack cut him off. Exactly why I'm perfect. Fleet Admiral Karath knows my reputation, knows I was forced out, knows I've been training aliens. Perfect narrative, bitter general selling out for asylum. I've got weeks left anyway. He pulled Marcus aside. Your father's notebook, everything I've taught you, pass it to your students someday. Make me proud. Marcus's hands shook. I can't do this without you. Jack's smile carried sadness. You already can. Teachers make themselves obsolete so students become masters. Command center erupted into coordinated chaos. 36 hours to convince invasion fleet Earth possessed capabilities, making conquest Pyrrhic victory. Jack coughed blood, focused on tactical displays showing 117 capital ships and accelerating into Sol system. Selena stood beside him, violet eyes bright. 34 years I watched. Never imagined it would end like this. Jack's voice emerged steady. Everything ends. Question is what we leave behind. Make sure recruits remember, age doesn't make you obsolete, it makes you essential. Experience is the weapon youth can't replicate and technology can't replace. The war room occupied Zone X's deepest level, shielded by 30 feet of reinforced concrete and Zarelian energy barriers. Jack stood before holographic displays showing 117 capital ships closing with mathematical precision, suggesting contempt for anything humanity could deploy. U.S. Joint Chiefs occupied one-side faces, carrying exhaustion from 12 hours finding no solutions, where physics insisted none existed. Zarelian dissidents held opposite-side refugees who'd chosen exile over complicity. Between them sat 14 recruits who'd graduated from training to combat without ceremony. Jack's voice cut through murmuring, Operation Ghost Storm has 3 phases. Phase 1 makes them think we already fought and barely survived. Phase 2 baits them into aggressive assault by broadcasting desperation. Phase 3 requires infiltration from someone they'll believe wants asylum more than loyalty. General Chen, U.S. Army 3 stars and 2 decades counterinsurgency experience, studied the overview with professional skepticism. Phase 1 relies on faking debris fields. How do we sell destroyed stations we never built? Jack manipulated the hologram. We use existing satellite debris, 3,000 pieces from 70 years of space exploration. We maneuver them into patterns suggesting recent combat concentrate distribution around coordinates where defensive stations would logically exist. Their sensors read mass and energy signatures, not intent. Make debris look like destroyed defenses, and they'll believe what they expect. Sarah's voice emerged from beside Vor. Phase 2 requires emergency broadcasts on channels they can crack. Content has to be specific enough to be believable, desperate enough to suggest collapse, yet coherent enough they don't suspect deception. Jack nodded. We broadcast on frequencies they've monitored since first contact. Military channels showing coordinated defense collapsing. Civilian emergency services overwhelmed. Government officials evacuating. Every message carries undertone of losing, but still fighting wounded animal dangerous precisely because cornered. Vor's bioluminescent markings flickered. Phase 3 requires someone to board command ship voluntarily. Korath will torture verification before believing anything. Jack met his eyes. I know, which is why I'm going. My record makes me perfect, forced out by my government-trained aliens, for species that discarded me dying from cancer, giving me weeks maximum. Bitter soldiers selling out for survival makes better narrative than they could invent. Marcus stood so fast his chair toppled. No, we find another way. Jack's hand on his shoulder carried weight, transcending physical pressure. There isn't. Math says we can't win through force. Deception requires someone expendable who can sell the lie convincingly. That's me. Selena spoke from the room's periphery. The virus component explained penetration of our security. Jack pulled up technical specifications Sarah had compiled. Your ship's network like human internet, centralized command, distributed processing, everything connected for efficiency. That connectivity becomes vulnerability. One infected system spreads contamination fleet-wide before anyone realizes compromise. He lifted coffee cup, tipped it slowly. Small action, geometric consequences. Technology's advantage becomes weakness when you prioritize connection over isolation. Planning consumed 6 hours, every detail argued and refined. By hour 7, they had something that might work if luck favored desperation. By hour 8, new intelligence arrived, making timeline meaningless. The fleet had accelerated again. Not 36 hours, 12. Maximum burn damaging engines beyond repair, but delivering invasion force before Ghost Storm could deploy completely. Jack absorbed the update mine, already recalculating. Then we launch now. Ghost Storm activates in 10 minutes. Command center exploded into coordinated chaos. Jack pulled Marcus aside. Your father's notebook, I added final entries. Everything I know about tactical deception leadership under impossible odds. Read it, learn from it, pass it forward. Marcus's hands trembled, accepting the leather journal grown heavier with accumulated wisdom. You taught me rage gets people killed. But I don't know how to not be angry about this. Jack's smile carried understanding. Be angry later. Right now, be effective. Anger you control becomes fuel. Anger controlling you becomes fatal liability. That's how experience transfers one painful lesson at a time. Lyra approached with formal bearing, suggesting ceremony. Memory binding tradition requires final transfer before warrior's death. I will carry every lesson. Jack touched her forehead in return gesture. Tell them mercy is strength. Tell them honor survives when power fades. Tell them one old human believed in them enough to die proving it. As Sarah and Vor stood together, friendship become template. Everyone referenced, you made me believe my voice mattered. That analysis was as valuable as strength. Vor's bioluminescence pulsed with grief patterns. You showed me humans and Xyrelians can be family. Everything I believed about species hierarchy you destroyed by making me care. Jack's throat tightened. You two prove what's possible when both sides choose understanding. Keep proving it. Selena waited until others retreated. 34 years, I watched you make choices that defined who you were. Never imagined the final choice would be this. Jack met her gaze. Everything ends. Question is whether it means something or just stops. I'd rather burn out doing something that matters than fade away counting ceiling tiles. Selena's voice dropped to harmonics only he could hear. Will they remember? Or will history record you as traitor? Jack's laugh carried no humor. Don't care what they remember, as long as they survive to remember anything. Reputation is what other people think. Legacy is what you leave behind that keeps working after you're gone. The F-15X waited on runway with patient inevitability. Jack walked toward it through pre-dawn darkness, each step measuring distance between everything behind and nothing ahead. His 14 recruits formed honor guard, without orders standing at attention, silent acknowledgement of debt that couldn't be repaid. The cockpit felt like coming home. Every control exactly where muscle memory expected every display familiar despite alien technology. Pre-flight checks carried comfort, transcending functional purpose one last time, executing sequence that had defined adult life. Radio crackled with voices trying to say goodbye. Marcus first, sir, for everything. For seeing potential we didn't know we had. Lyra's harmonics carried frequencies suggesting tears. You taught us honor, General. Real honor. Sarah's analytical precision broke down. We'll make you proud, every day, every choice. Vor's response emerged in death poetry cadence. You showed us better way, brother in all but biology. Jack absorbed their words without response because anything he said would break composure holding him together. His hands moved through start sequence engines, spooling up with sound that had been life's soundtrack. Tower clearance came through with bureaucratic efficiency. Jack released brakes, felt acceleration press him into seat. The runway stretched ahead horizontal, becoming vertical, as airspeed increased past rotation, and wheels left ground for final time. Selena's voice transmitted one last time. Fly well, warrior. Jack's response emerged steady. Your Majesty, 34 years you watched. Now watch me finish what I started. The aircraft climbed through atmosphere while memory replayed moments defining trajectory from idealist to pragmatist, dying to save species that had mostly forgotten his existence. 1989 over Montana, where he'd first detected observers. 1991 over Iraq, where mercy defined character. 2021 at Pentagon, where being right cost everything. 2025 in Nevada, where 14 kids learned cooperation was possible. Every moment connected chain of causation leading to this flight, this mission, this choice to spend final hours productively instead of surrendering to biological inevitability. The tractor beam seized his aircraft at 20,000 kilometers, gentle but irresistible. Jack didn't resist, allowed himself drawn toward command ship measuring 12,000 tons of exotic materials and gravitational manipulation. Hangar base swallowed his aircraft. Royal Guards emerged from multiple directions surrounding cockpit before Jack finished shutdown. Fleet Admiral Korath observed from elevated platform bulk, suggesting genetic modification for intimidation, scarred features testifying to decades of combat. His voice resonated with harmonics designed to induce submission. The famous Reaper, you look old, dead, worn, defeated. Jack climbed from cockpit with deliberate slowness, hands visible, and empty. Admiral Korath. I'm here to discuss terms of my asylum in exchange for intelligence regarding Earth's remaining defensive capabilities. Korath's laugh carried contempt. You look defeated by gravity and time and species that discarded you. Jack met his eyes. Old means I survived everyone who tried to kill me, including myself, and defeat is relative when you're still standing after 40 years. Guards escorted him to interrogation chamber, where technology probed thoughts and verified truthfulness through neural scans humans couldn't block. Jack submitted to examination designed to break resistance, allowed them to see exactly what he wanted, revealed bitterness about forced retirement, anger at species rejecting warnings, fear of dying alone, desperate calculation that survival meant betraying loyalties outgrown. Every layer authentic because emotions were real, even if conclusions were manufactured. Korath studied neural scan results with satisfaction. Your government forced you out. Your species ignored expertise. Your students will die fighting. Why maintain loyalty to a planet that treats veterans as disposable? Jack's voice carried exhaustion requiring no performance. I don't. I maintain loyalty to living long enough to matter instead of suffocating slowly. You're offering asylum. I'm offering locations of Earth's hidden quantum defense satellites. The data chip contained exactly what Korath expected. Detailed specifications of fictional weapons, platforms, coordinates suggesting defensive perimeter technical documentation, convincing because Sarah had constructed lies using authentic Zerelian engineering principles. Korath downloaded information directly neural interface transferring data to command systems, spreading virus through fleet network while discussing asylum terms. Outside, Ghost Storm executed with precision, born from 12 hours compressed preparation. 50 human Zyrelian hybrid fighters created illusion of 500 through coordinated jamming. Debris fields positioned to suggest destroyed stations lit up with emergency beacons. Every major government transmitted evacuation orders on channels Zyrelian intelligence monitored. Marcus's voice cut across tactical channels, with authority making his father proud. All units pattern Echo 7 on my mark. Maintain jamming protocols. 3-2 mark. The integrated force moved with fluid coordination, making species boundaries irrelevant. Korath received panicked reports claiming hundreds of enemy fighters, overwhelming defensive fire casualties mounting. Every sensor reading confirmed Earth was more dangerous than projected, that conquest would cost more than acceptable. The virus activated at the moment Korath's arrogance peaked, cascading through network systems with geometric progression outpacing countermeasures. Command protocols failed, navigation reported conflicting positions, weapons targeting developed catastrophic errors. The fleet dissolved from coordinated armada into scattered ships, fighting individual battles against malfunction. Jack watched through viewports as invasion force retreated, scattered, abandoned assault in disarray that would humiliate Korath for remaining centuries. Victory achieved through deception instead of firepower, wisdom instead of weapons. Command ship trajectory showed impact with Los Angeles in 17 minutes. Gravitational capture combining with failed navigation, creating ballistic arc that would crater city and kill 3 million in initial impact alone. Escape pods lined corridor leading from bridge to hangar bay. Jack reached nearest pod keyed access sequence, stared at salvation, meaning abandonment of calculation already completed. His hands moved to pod controls, not climbing inside, but redirecting external thrusters to fire at precise angle against ship's rotation axis. Small force at lever point using physics, Archimedes would appreciate converting 30-meter pod into fulcrum, shifting 12,000 tons through leverage rather than brute strength. The numbers worked, barely required. Every gram of fuel meant Jack would ride ship down instead of launching clear. But Los Angeles would miss impact zone by 800 miles, and Pacific absorbed falling spacecraft without civilian casualties. Marcus's voice transmitted from chaos outside. General, your trajectory shows impact, eject now. Jack's hands stayed on controls, making micro adjustments. Negative, ship's heading for LA. 3 million casualties if I don't correct. I'm correcting. Selena's voice cut through next harmonics breaking. Jack, you don't have to. Jack's laugh carried acceptance. Your Majesty, 40 years ago, I swore to protect and defend. Just keeping my word. Been a pleasure proving your father wrong. Marcus again breaking. Sir, please. Jack's final words emerged steady despite failing lungs and trembling hands. Marcus the notebook. Teach them everything. Make them understand legacy isn't what you leave behind when you die. It's what you put into others that keeps working after you're gone. One person can change the world if they're willing to pay the price. A pod fuel exhausted in precisely calculated burn-shifting trajectory by 6 degrees microscopic adjustment, translating to 800 miles at impact. Jack release controls slid down. Bulkhead watched through viewport, our Earth grew larger, and Los Angeles passed safely beneath corrected path. Pacific Ocean rushed up with physics indifference. Impact should have killed him instantly, but Zyrelian hull integrity maintained cabin pressure, long enough for Jack's consciousness to recognize water closing over viewport light, fading from blue to green to black, cold seeping through systems never designed for oceanic descent. His final breath tasted of salt and blood and satisfaction. Radio carried voices screaming his name, but he couldn't respond anymore. Didn't need to because mission was complete. Consciousness faded without drama. Just gradual transition from being to not being, soldier completing final mission exactly as previous ones, doing what needed to be done, regardless of personal cost. Command center erupted into chaos bordering hysteria. Marcus's screen went dark as Jack's transmission cut to static, everyone understanding simultaneously what silence meant. Marcus screamed something incoherent, and Lyra caught him before his knees buckled. Sarah sobbing, while Vor held her steady, everyone surrounding each other because grief shared was slightly more bearable than grief experienced alone. Selena stared at empty display where Jack's life signs had been violet eyes streaming moisture, 34 years of observation, culminating in watching someone she'd never admitted caring about die, exactly the way she'd always known he would, doing something heroically stupid that saved everyone except himself. Weeks that followed passed in administrative blur of debriefings and negotiations. Marcus spent those weeks preparing memorial while reading notebook filled with Jack's final entries, learning difference between anger that consumed and purpose that sustained. Other recruits processed grief through action, teaching frameworks to next generation, proving integration worked by making it normal. 4 months after impact, Nellis Air Force Base hosted memorial attended by thousands who'd never met Jack Mitchell, but understood what his death purchased. F-15 flyover executed missing man formation with precision, making sky itself mourn. Marcus stood at podium wearing wings that had belonged to his instructor. General Jack Mitchell was 62 years old, terminal cancer, forced retirement, and he saved 8 billion lives. Not through superior firepower, but through 40 years of accumulated experience applied to problem everyone else said was unsolvable. Selena announced Mitchell Academy of Strategic Defense from platform beside Marcus Joint Human Zyrelian Military Institution dedicated to proving cooperation scaled beyond experimental units. 600 students, first-class curriculum built on Jack's tactical frameworks. Dedication plaque carried inscription, Jack would have hated for sentimentality. To the warrior who proved wisdom is the weapon age provides and youth must learn. Kale's tribunal concluded with exile to outer colonies, stripped of rank, sentenced to centuries as living example. He smiled while guards escorted him away, convinced empires built on peace never lasted. Marcus watched from gallery and understood punishment didn't prevent next traitor, only teaching did. Mitchell Academy's opening day dawned with clear skies. Marcus stood before 600 students, human and Zyrelian both. Captain Chen, did you really learn from the General Mitchell? Marcus smiled with grief and pride that would define his career, every day for 8 weeks. Let me tell you about Desert Storm 1991 and why tactics 60 years old saved Earth from species 4,000 years more advanced. That evening, Marcus found sealed envelope in Jack's memorial office. Open after my death, watch alone first. Recording played on holographic display with resolution, making grief fresh. Jack's voice emerged steady. Marcus, if you're watching this, the plan worked. You asked me why I kept fighting at 62. Here's the answer. Every generation stands guard, while the next one grows up safe enough to question whether guards are necessary. I stood mine. Now it's your turn. Don't mourn me. Honor me. Teach them everything. Make them understand that experience isn't about being old. It's about being wise. Wisdom is the one thing no technology can replace. Eagle One signing off. The sky belongs to you now. Marcus sobbed in privacy his position didn't allow, then wiped eyes and returned to quarters where lesson plans waited. Chain remained unbroken, generation to generation experience flowing forward through those willing to teach and capable of learning. Years passed with speed, characteristic of time measured in accomplishments. Mitchell Academy graduated 12,000 students. Zero wars fought since Ghost Storm, dozens of crises resolved through cooperation. Neither species could manage alone. Notebook passed from Marcus to successor to generation after each instructor, adding entries, expanding frameworks while maintaining philosophical foundation. 2 years after invasion that never happened, deep space sensors detected new contact approaching Sol system. Vessel maintained peaceful posture, broadcast diplomatic intentions, requested dialogue with Earth's military leadership. Marcus received alert in his office, surrounded by holographic displays showing 1,400 students currently enrolled. New Aliens Commander appeared on communication screen, features suggesting Predator lineage. We've monitored your interaction with Xyrelian Empire. The invasion fleet's retreat was analyzed extensively. This General Mitchell demonstrated strategic deception at mastery level. We wish to learn from Earth's tactical frameworks. Propose cultural exchange knowledge, sharing mutual benefit. Marcus studied Alien Commander with analytical framework. Jack had taught him reading posture and inflection. His hand-touched notebook, feeling its weight remind him, experience transferred across generations provided advantage. Raw intelligence couldn't replicate. He smiled with confidence built on foundation laid by man, who died proving wisdom mattered. His response emerged steady. Welcome to Sol System. We're prepared to discuss cooperation. But understand, we don't teach tactics in isolation from philosophy. General Mitchell left us frameworks saying wisdom without ethics is just clever destruction. If you're willing to learn both, we're willing to teach. Otherwise, observe from distance while we continue building something better than anyone expected. Alien Commander's expression shifted to something approximating respect. Your teacher trained you well. We accept your terms. When can we begin? Marcus closed communication and opened notebook to Jack's final entry. Age doesn't make you obsolete. It makes you essential. Experience is the weapon youth can't replicate and technology can't replace. Legacy isn't what you leave behind when you die. It's what you put into others that keeps working after you are gone. Teach them. Always teach them. That's how we defeat entropy and death and the universe's indifference. One lesson at a time. One student at a time. One generation at a time. Until the chain extends so far forward that nobody remembers where it started, only that it continues. Nevada sky stretched clear and blue above Mitchell Academy, 600 students training on grounds where Jack had taught his final lessons. Legacy manifesting through every coordinated maneuver between human and alien pilots. Learning cooperation produced results neither achieved alone. Somewhere in Pacific Ocean, 12,000 tons of Xyrelian engineering rested on bottoms slowly colonized by life that didn't distinguish between terrestrial and extraterrestrial wreckage. And in classrooms and briefing rooms, in tactical simulators across human Xyrelian alliance, instructors taught frameworks developed by dying man who'd believed so completely in cooperation's potential that he'd spent final hours proving it worked even when mathematics suggested otherwise. Jack Mitchell died at 62. But his legacy lessons embedded into students who taught their students who trained generation after ensured he'd never truly die. Teachers seldom did. They just became invisible in the work of everyone they'd touched.